platypus controlling me. He's underneath the table. There's a platypus controlling him. What?
This is not a villain. This isn't just a song. And what you're watching is somehow going to turn into an important character moment. Phineas and Ferb was weird, and before it released, a lot of studio people and network execs pointed that out. They had some kind of unexpected concerns, so much so that it almost didn't get made. But they were wrong. The show would end up being brilliant, even if they might have had a point. Phineas and Ferb did the one thing that almost every show is afraid of, and somehow that became the best thing about it.
Okay, we fade in on the same backyard that Phineas and Ferb always start every episode in.
Jeff Marsh and Dan Poppelmeier had a really hard time getting this show made for partially that reason. They had worked on this and this show and this one, but in their own time, they drew this. It would take over 15 years to get Phineas and Ferb made. Some execs thought that the characters were too Christly, that there wasn't enough conflict, but the biggest complaint network execs at places like Fox and Cartoon Network had while rejecting the pitch was that the show was too complex, that it just wouldn't work. Now, too complex probably sounds crazy to you. It did to me at first, but then I rewatched it again. And I actually think the reality was they just hadn't seen anything like it work before. And it's all in how the episodes of the show are built.
Mom, Phineas and Ferb have brought Genghis Khan back from the past, and he's teaching the neighbors how to throw hatchets from horseback.
Phineas and Ferb is exactly what you're taught not to do when writing a TV show. A typical animated show like Phineas and Ferb would look like this. You'd have your idea or problem, then your conflict, then your resolution. And anything can happen at each step of that process. The problem, the conflict, and resolution should all be different episode to episode. Or should they? Phineas and Ferb strips all of that away, literally removing it to the point where it doesn't even follow typical A-B plot structure. Here's a weird statement that I think kind of describes Phineas and Ferb oddly well. It is structured like adult life. The majority of the non-special episodes work like this. The day starts and the boys have nothing to do. Plot A, they pick a project and get to work. They build or do something insane, but there's no true emotional conflict, with a few exceptions. This plotline is usually literally pure freedom, the potential of every day. Then there's plot B, that Perry sneaks off to start. To get the conflict that most shows think is so necessary, we have plot B, where Doofenshmirtz is parallel to the boys building his own contraption, and Perry is there to try to stop him. Plot C, Candace is off, in parallel to Perry, chasing down Mom to bust Phineas and Ferb. Candace would usually be the typical tension. Here she's just kind of timed tension. But even that gets stripped out because we know exactly what can and can't happen, because the structure is rigid. Plot A is always ended by plot B, which always foils plot C. That is perfect writing. But most shows would never dare create a structure so rigid that it is used exactly as is for 100+ episodes. But weirdly, that's exactly where the magic starts for the show.
There it is! The elevator to the moon!
Candace to me is a stand-in for growing up, a walking metaphor, and the bridge between the boys and the miserable life Doofenshmirtz leads. And she kind of leans into what I mean by the show being structured like adult life. On paper, the show should be boring. It's eerily similar day to day. The same problems, the same people, the same backyard, the same results, the same person always looking over your shoulder. That's adulthood. And then it shows the audience how much can be done with the days you're given, even when they start and end the exact same way. So as Candace tries to force the boys to grow up, essentially, to get them to face the consequences of their actions, to bridge that gap, they instead do what every adult wants to do. Make the days count, feel like a kid. We also see this in Doofenshmirtz's constant but disguised yearning for a different childhood, which I will come back to. But Candace never succeeds, and you're never worried about if she will. So while so much of TV is terrified of writing narrative without obvious conflict, pumping so much of it full of overacting and manufactured drama, you don't see that here. Because when you make the conflict finding the joy in each day, for instance, you never have to change it. You can structure one episode and never worry about it again because it's a feeling everyone understands that never goes away. If the writing is good enough to support that, that's brilliant. Where most TV is afraid of being for everyone or too broad, Phineas and Ferb works because it is. And it's much harder to write a show like this because you have no choice every episode but to be as creative as you can inside these very hard confines, which forces the writers to literally think like Phineas and Ferb, and the show oozes creativity because of it. Every episode from a writing perspective becomes a puzzle you solve with imagination, and you see that on your screen.
But it manages something else that's even more impressive to me.
I mentioned magic earlier, which is kind of a ridiculous buzzword, but another thing TV stays away from is genre bending. Phineas and Ferb does that every episode, and I do think it's kind of magical because underneath that structure is the same structure of Disney's animated Renaissance period. You know, the run, Lion King, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, Mulan. There are over 100 full-length musical numbers, full-blown original songs in Phineas and Ferb, with at least one in every episode. And the reason it works is because of how committed to that structure I talked about it all is. These songs are good, sure, but they're narrative devices. You know every episode will have one, but importantly, like Disney's Renaissance films, they advance character or plot almost every time. That'd be difficult to pull off once a season, let alone every single episode. And these are not throwaway songs. I guarantee you remember some of these. This song, and this one here, pop into my mind probably once a week.
But where I think the show truly separates itself is in who it's made for.
I talked about this before, but this show is stuffed with adult humor.
And I know what you are doing, Norm. You're a sick, sick robot.
When Disney would give notes on the episodes, they'd often complain that kids wouldn't get it, and Dan Poppenmeyer's response was, "I don't care." He'd also say things like kids are smarter than you give them credit for, and that he was making a show that was also for the adults in the room. But when I talked earlier about how everyone can relate to the structure of the show, I think that really runs deep. Doofenshmirtz, for instance, is a really complex reflection of the rundown adult. He's not actually evil. A lot of the time he's just exhausted, existentially questioning what the point of any of this is. He's got a rough childhood that we see in flashbacks. He's also a man that desperately wants to connect with and understand his daughter. He's really just a sitcom protagonist trapped in a villain's body. So much so that sometimes you want to see him win. Even Perry tries to give him a win every once in a while because really, they're just two co-workers at odds with each other. That's a through line that is clearly relatable to an older audience. You see this with Perry's boss as well, who frequently makes attempts to connect with Perry on a social level. And this gets more interesting when you consider that most episodes end by Perry and Doofenshmirtz getting into a petty, childish physical altercation due to an inability to communicate.
And this communication issue is what led you to replace Perry the Platypus.
All while the kids of the show overcome their social obstacles by behaving and communicating maturely. The show never glorifies adulthood. Instead, it uses its characters to argue that viewing the world like you did or do as a kid might solve a lot of your problems. Again, shows are terrified of being too broad, but that is universal messaging. And all of that is wrapped in the show's no idiots and no jerks rule. Part of the reason execs were worried about the show was the characters weren't generic enough, essentially. Younger audiences latch onto archetypes they recognize, but these characters worked for younger audiences and older audiences because they were a reflection, most of the time, of what people should be, not what they are, which is why the lack of emotional conflict in the show's episodes works. So at the end of the day, in a lot of episodes, it's really just the adults who can see the conflict hidden underneath all of that in the show. The fight against time, the fight to make every day count, the fight against what I think Candace sometimes represents, losing sight of your youth. I think there's a reason that we see every age represented in the show meaningfully, which a lot of animated shows also don't do. And it's because they're all at different stages of youth. Physically being in it, losing sight of it, and wondering where it went. The execs weren't wrong. That is complex storytelling, but it's wrapped in the simplest, most repetitive bow in television history. And that made it nearly perfect.
It's a simple postmodern fusion of origami and pop-up. Yeah!
After revisiting the show, I realized Phineas and Ferb actually did quite a lot of things most shows are afraid to do. It's not just the single, exact structure of 100 episodes, which is unique. It's not just the genre bending, it's also its attitude. We do live in a space now where cynicism and sharp comedy leak into most TV, film, and animation. Phineas and Ferb in that context is kind of like a beacon. Proof that something can indeed just be fun, that things can reach everyone before anyone as long as they're good enough.
And there is an argument to be made that the show's newest revived season 5 does some of this a bit different. Whether that's good or bad, well, that's up to you, but
creator Dan Poppenmeyer's mother used to tell him that he should never waste a day growing up. So he spent his days making home movies and building outer space sets in his house. And so it was natural for Phineas and Ferb's writers to put themselves in their characters' shoes. What would we do if we had to make every day count? And then they went and built a world that shows everyone watching it that it can be hard to live every day like it's the most important day you're going to live. But if a kid with a triangle for a head can do it, you probably can too.
Same thing tomorrow? Nah, I like to keep moving forward.
Sharks have to continue to move forward, or they'll drown.
That is it for today's episode. If you enjoyed this one, press the like button down below. And talking about a show that ran as long as Phineas and Ferb got me thinking, what's a show you wish got more episodes or ran for longer? Anyways, as always, if you haven't yet done so, hit subscribe. And that little bell actually helps a lot. It just makes sure you're notified when something comes to the channel. So hit the little bell. And as always, this has been